India is a multilingual nation encapsulating hundreds of languages and dialects. This bewildering variety has its roots in the country's fascinating history, stretching back thousands of years to when literature as we know it was nascent here. At that time, two language families were dominant, Indo-Aryan and Dravidian, followed by smaller groups speaking Tibeto-Burman or other unrelated languages. Through looking at this ancient past, we can explore the question behind India's many tongues. Why does one land have such immense linguistic complexity? During this period in the subcontinent, communities were transitioning from semi-nomadic to settled agriculture. The intellectual class among these groups, much like people in other parts of the world, were preoccupied with both immediate societal issues and grand existential questions, such as the meaning of life and the universe. These individuals engaged in philosophical debates and discussions, passing down their ideas orally since there was no written script available at the time. In the northern region of the subcontinent, the literary language was Sanskrit, specifically Vedic Sanskrit, which is one of the oldest languages known to humankind. The Vedas, which are religious texts containing discussions of deities, hymns, mantras, rituals, and philosophical musings, originated as an oral tradition around 3,500 years ago. These texts are some of the earliest religious texts in India and in the world, and this period of history lasted for a significant amount of time. Around the time of the composition of the Upanishads, the Vedic period comes to an end after having lasted for a significant period of time. The Upanishads are the final part of the Vedas, dated back to approximately 2,500 years ago, and are commonly referred to as the Vedanta or the end of the Vedas. There are 105 Upanishads, and they delve into a range of topics beyond just hymns, mantras, and rituals, including concepts such as meditation, philosophy, consciousness, and other ontological knowledge. Together with the Vedas, the Upanishads have formed a critical mass of literature, which serves as the foundation of later Hindu philosophy and is essential in laying the groundwork for the Indic civilization. It's worth noting that the language used in the Upanishads is still Sanskrit, and this literary development is mainly occurring in the north. Around the same time, in the southern part of the subcontinent, a Proto-Dravidian language was being spoken, which is now gradually evolving into what scholars classify as Old Tamil, the first of the three stages in Tamil's evolution. This period saw a significant expansion in agriculture, metalworking, commodity production, and trade, as numerous small political units across the country consolidated to form large kingdoms called the Mahajanapadas. This era also marks the transition of Vedic Sanskrit from being the primary language to becoming a secondary language of religion and learning, which in turn marks the beginning of the classical age in India. As the larger kingdoms and empires were being established and trade was flourishing, there was a need for language standardization in literature and the arts. Consequently, a renowned scholar and Sanskrit philologist of the time, Panini, authored the Ashtadhyayi, the first and one of the most significant texts in linguistics. The Ashtadhyayi text dates back to around the 5th century BCE and describes the Sanskrit language as it was used at the time, while also prescribing correct and standardized grammar. Panini utilizes syntax, morphology, and lexicon to create rules using a technical metalanguage. The sophisticated rules, techniques, and algorithms used in generating well-formed words and sentences have been highly influential throughout the history of linguistics. Although classical or Paninian Sanskrit is similar to Vedic Sanskrit, it was still considered a separate variety and became a marker of social class and educational attainment. However, over time, languages spoken by common people continue to evolve, with words taking on new meanings, some words becoming obsolete, and new words entering the lexicon. Eventually, grammar even starts to deviate in unique ways in different parts of the subcontinent. The Sanskrit of the classical age further evolves into distinct Prakrits in various parts of the country. Prakrit is not a specific language, but rather a term that means natural or ordinary, used to categorize the vernacular or local languages of that time. Some scholars highlight the independent development of these languages, which were often separated from the history of Sanskrit, while others hold differing views. Nevertheless, time moves on. As the timeline moves beyond 500 BCE, Many kingdoms rise and fall, and India experiences significant economic and cultural growth in vast areas of the subcontinent. The various Prakrits, which were spoken languages, soon receive patronage from local kings and become literary languages. The earliest surviving inscriptions in a Prakrit dialect called Pali date back to Emperor Ashoka's reign between 268 and 232 BCE. Let's turn our attention back to the south, where some of the most significant old Tamil inscriptions are found in caves in a variant of the Brahmi script called Tamil Brahmi, dating back 2,300 years ago, between 300 BCE and 300 CE, with the majority of the work created from 100 CE to 250 CE. Sangam literature emerges as probably the earliest body of literature in South India. What sets Sangam literature apart in ancient times is that it's primarily secular literature, authored by approximately 473 poets from diverse backgrounds. Some came from royalty, some were businessmen, and others were farmers. Remarkably, at least 27 of the poets were women, a notable achievement for that time. Sangam literature can be divided into two primary categories, Akkam and Puram. Akkam poetry discusses human emotions and sentiments in the context of romantic love, connection, and sensuality, while Puram poetry focuses on heroic achievements in the setting of battle and public life. Around 200 BCE, we also begin to see some of the first inscriptions in the Kannada language. The first written record can be traced back to Emperor Ashoka's Brahmagiri edict. The first full-length stone inscription with Brahmi characters is found about 600 years later in 450 CE, which indicates that Kannada had become an administrative language by this time. By around 575 CE, the first inscriptions attributed to the Telugu Cholas in literature in the Telugu language began to appear. This happened when the Cholas broke from the practice of using Prakrit and began writing royal proclamations in the local language. The Chalukya kings of Telangana also began using Telugu for their inscriptions. Meanwhile, Old Tamil continued to evolve, and by the 8th century CE, it had completed its transition into Middle Tamil, which had a lot of inscriptions and a vast body of religious and secular literature. This literature also includes songs and poems of some famous Bhakti poets. During this time, a dialect diverged from Middle Tamil in the southwestern region, which later became its own distinct language called Malayalam. This divergence from Middle Tamil was a result of some influence from Sanskrit grammar and lexicon. From 600 CE onwards, Kannada went through a lot of changes. From 1400 to 1600 CE, during the peak of the mighty Vijayanagar Empire and the reign of King Krishnadevaraja, the language experienced growth in all its literary forms. With the support and patronage from the state, incredible works of literature were created during this time, and poet Kumaravyasa even rendered the epic Mahabharata in Kannada. It's also during this time that we see the origin of Dasa Sahitya. By now, Middle Tamil had evolved into modern Tamil. This explains the developments in the south. Back in the north, over the centuries, the various dialects of Prakrits transformed into Appabrahmasas, which are believed to have been used until the 13th century CE. The term Appabrahmasa implies a non-standard or corrupt language, and the Sanskrit-speaking intellectual elites of that time may have coined it. Nonetheless, the different dialects of the Prakrits continued to spread and flourish. As centuries passed, these Appabrahmasas eventually evolved into the modern-day Indo-Aryan or Indic languages that we know today, with their unique scripts and rich history of literature. These modern-day Indic languages are categorized into various groups, such as the Dardic, Northern, Northwestern, Western, Central, Eastern, and Southern. Many of these languages are widely spoken by tens or even hundreds of millions of people across the Indian subcontinent. In addition to the Indo-Aryan or Indic languages, a smaller family of Tibeto-Burman languages is also spoken in the region, such as Manipuri, Tripuri, Bodo, Garo, and various groups of Naga languages. While it's not easy to find a ton of information about these languages, Manipuri was the ancient court language of the Manipur kingdom until it was merged into India in 1949. It is the native tongue of the Meitei people of Manipur, and is also the lingua franca between all groups in Manipur. Present-day Manipuri evolved from Old Manipuri and has its own script, with the earliest known usage of the script being found engraved in a coin from the 6th century CE. The earliest known written record in this language is a copperplate inscription dating back to the 8th century CE. Indian languages have a captivating history of evolution, traveling through time and intertwining with other foreign tongues. From the north to south, east to west, this rich tapestry has been woven into each region's linguistic repertoire, making India home some of the most spectacularly diverse language communities found on Earth. In fact, one can find evidence in our very currency notes, where you'll discover not just Hindi or English, but 15 different dialects embossed upon them. Truly marvelous is why we call it Incredible India. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Drop us a comment for videos you would like to see in the future.